Good evening, dear listener. As you settle in tonight, find a cozy spot, perhaps adjust your blanket just a little, pour yourself a calming sip of tea, and gently rest your head against your pillow. Take a deep, slow breath, feeling the air fill your lungs, and then exhale softly, letting the day's worries drift away like a forgotten notification on a silent phone. Tonight, I invite you to relax and prepare for a journey into a world that's both distant and strangely familiar. Imagine a place where survival isn't measured by Wi-Fi signals or the speed of your morning coffee, but by something much more primal, by living soil, fierce weather, and the relentless march of time. Picture, if you will, a landscape where shadows dance in the flicker of a dying fire, and the wind whispers secrets through the cracks of a humble hut. Now consider this. What if even a single day as a Viking farmer could bring you to tears? Not because of the stories of heroism or the grandeur of conquest, but because of the quiet, exhausting struggle to simply stay alive, day after day, season after season. It's a world where the simplest act, like tending a field or feeding a stubborn cow, feels like an epic quest, as if the universe itself conspired to test your endurance. And as your eyes grow heavy, you'll soon wake, not in your familiar bed, but in a place where the air is thick with the scent of earth and rain, where shadows lengthen and the murmurs of the past seem to echo just beyond reach. A world where your role is far stranger and perhaps a little more real than anything you've known before. The air around you is dense with a mixture of smells, sharp, smoky, and somehow earthy all at once. You're lying on a rough wooden floor, the grain pressing into your back and elbows, the surface uneven beneath you, splintered in places, as if it's been worn down by countless years of use. Your skin prickles from the cold, a biting wind slipping through cracks in the walls, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant rain. Your bedding is a tangle of coarse linen and wool, scratchy against your skin, and as you move, you notice the faint scent of sweat and old firewood. The room is dim, lit only by a flickering flame, maybe a tallow candle or a small hearth, casting dancing shadows along the uneven walls. Shadows that seem to breathe, to whisper secrets you can't quite hear. The faint aroma of burning herbs mingles with the smell of damp hay, stored in the corners, and somewhere nearby, a faint, metallic tang hints at tools, or perhaps the bloodstains of last night's chores. Your ears pick up a symphony of sounds. The distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, rhythmically striking an anvil, echoes through the village, a steady heartbeat of metal and fire. Somewhere, a pig squeals as it's fed, and over the roof, a crow caws loudly, impatient for the dawn. The murmur of voices, some gruff, some hurried, drifts in from outside, along with the occasional clatter of carts and the hurried steps of villagers moving about. You might even hear the faint, persistent bleating of sheep or goats tethered nearby, their bells jingling softly in the breeze. The air carries a medley of odors, smoke curling from the hearth, the pungent aroma of herbs burned to ward off illness, the sharp sting of vinegar used for cleaning, and beneath it all, the faint, persistent smell of damp wool and unwashed bodies. You catch a whiff of something rotting in the street, perhaps a forgotten fish or a spilled bucket of refuse, reminding you that cleanliness is a luxury here, not a given. Your fingers brush against the coarse fabric of your clothes, rough, stiff, and unrefined, like the land itself. Your hands feel the rigid leather of your boots, the coarse weave of your tunic, and the roughness of a woven belt. The cold makes you shiver, and you realize how different this is from the soft, temperature-controlled comfort of your modern life, where the worst thing was a dead Wi-Fi signal or a frozen screen. Here, the concept of comfort is a distant memory, replaced by the constant, honest challenge of survival. It's almost humorous, your idea of a bad morning used to involve forgetting your phone charger or spilling coffee on your shirt. Here, it's realizing that your nose smells worse than the pigs in the pen, or that the water you're about to drink is murky and tepid, with a taste that clings to your tongue in a way that no amount of mouthwash could fix. It's remarkable how quickly you adapt, or how you're forced to. Now take a moment. Sit up carefully, feeling the roughness of the floor beneath you, and reach for your cloak or tunic. Your hands grasp the coarse fibers, and with a slight shiver, you start to get dressed, pulling on your rugged linen shirt, adjusting your belt, and slipping into sturdy trousers. Each movement is deliberate, practiced, as if you've done this 1,000 times before. You tighten your rough leather shoes and lift your head, blinking away the haze of sleep. Outside, the village begins to stir. You see figures moving along the dirt paths, men and women in simple, woven clothes, their faces weathered by wind and time. Children run past, their laughter ringing out, a sharp contrast to the steady hum of daily toil. Dozens of small wooden houses with thatched roofs cluster together, some smoke rising from chimneys, others still silent. A blacksmith's forge glows faintly in the distance, its sparks flickering like tiny stars against the dawn. As you observe, you notice the villagers' reactions to you. Some nod respectfully, recognizing your role, while others cast curious glances at your unfamiliar attire or the mask you wear, perhaps a simple cloth or a leather covering. There's a mixture of reverence, impatience, and a quiet acceptance that this is just another day in a world where survival depends not on Wi-Fi, but on strength, wit, and endurance. And yet, as you take it all in, the smells, sounds, and textures, you realize that to truly understand where you've just woken up, you need to look back to see the bigger picture. This is no ordinary morning, and your new reality is woven into a story much older, much deeper. To grasp it fully, we must step back and see the world that shaped this life, an endless dance of land, labor, and resilience, where tears are shed not over missed notifications, but over the relentless weight of survival itself. It's the early medieval age, somewhere around the 9th or 10th century, a time when kingdoms and clans jostled for power amidst the chaos of conquest, alliances, and endless skirmishes. Imagine a world where the lines between civilization and wilderness are blurred, where the horizon is dotted with simple wooden villages rather than sprawling metropolises, and where the pace of life moves to the rhythm of the seasons, the rising sun, and the tolling of church bells, or perhaps the distant roar of a Viking longship. In this landscape, society is a patchwork quilt of hierarchies and roles. At the top sit the noblemen and chieftains, powerful figures whose word is law, ruling from fortified halls that resemble castles more than cozy homes. Below them, the clergy hold sway, guiding the spiritual and moral compass of the people, often intertwined with political authority. Then come the merchants and craftsmen, those who trade and craft, eking out their existence in bustling market towns that are more vibrant than you might expect, their streets lively with the shouts of vendors, the clatter of horseshoes, and the clink of coin. And at the bottom, the common folk, farmers, labourers, and their families, struggling to survive from one season to the next, their lives often a daily negotiation with the unpredictable whims of nature and the demands of those above them. Speaking of wealth, the divide between the rich and the poor is stark. The noble's hall is a fortress of warmth and abundance, filled with roasted meats, fine fabrics, and treasures brought back from distant lands, silks, spices, and ingots of silver. Meanwhile, the common folk wear rough-spun clothes, patched and mended countless times, and their daily bread might be stale, their humble homes little more than huts made of wattle and daub, with thatched roofs sagging under the weight of rain. Power is concentrated in the hands of a few, kings, earls, or chieftains whose authority is enforced by warriors and a network of loyalties, while the majority depends on luck, strength, and a shared sense of tradition for survival. The world outside is a place of contrasts, countryside and chaos, order and disorder. Picture wide-open fields where farmers plough the stubborn soil with oxen, their hands rough and calloused, their backs bent under the weight of their daily toil. The towns are lively, markets bustling with activity, more chaotic than a Black Friday sale, but with more pigs than people wandering through narrow, muddy streets. Market stalls overflow with dried fish, salted meats and barrels of ale, while merchants shout over each other, trying to sell their wares amidst the smell of fresh bread and burning wood. Churches and monasteries stand as beacons of faith, their bells ringing out across the land, calling the faithful to prayer or marking the hour of labor, and sometimes, just as often, signaling trouble or impending conflict. And what about the rhythm of life? Well, it's dictated by the sun and the seasons. Wake-up calls come from the crowing roosters or the tolling bells, not your smartphone alarm. The day begins with chores, milking cows, tending fields, chopping wood, repetitive, exhausting, and necessary. Taking a bath, that's a rare event, almost suspicious, like announcing to your neighbors that you're planning something shady. Instead, washings happen in rivers or in basins of cold water, with soap made from animal fat and ashes. Your mornings might be punctuated by the clang of blacksmiths working at their anvils, or the shouts of children playing in the dirt, their laughter echoing through the village like a simple melody of life. Religion weaves into every aspect, perhaps a saint's feast day, or a superstition passed down through generations, like believing that carrying a handful of onions keeps the plague at bay, or that sniffing vinegar-soaked flowers wards off evil spirits. Now imagine this world's political landscape. It's a patchwork of kingdoms and petty states, often at war or in uneasy alliances. Kings and earls hold court in grand halls, their authority maintained through a combination of loyalty, fear, and the threat of violent retribution. Invasions and raids are common. Vikings, Saxons, and other tribes constantly clash over land, wealth, and reputation. Epidemics come and go, decimating populations with little warning. No antibiotics, no vaccines, just superstition and prayer as your only defenses. Religion dominates the collective mind, shaping laws, customs, and everyday life. Superstitions run deep. Some believed that carrying a sprig of rowan or a carved talisman could ward off evil, while others swore that a specific ritual or prayer could protect their home from misfortune. And amidst all this, there are the odd, almost humorous quirks of the era. Some folks thought that carrying a handful of onions in their pockets warded off the plague. Organic medicine, they called it. Others swore that sniffing flowers soaked in vinegar was safer than keeping at a distance. Masked faces, but make it medieval. People believed in strange remedies, in charms and spells, in the power of a good luck token or a well-placed rune. It was a world where logic often took a back seat to superstition, yet somehow it all worked, at least for those who survived from one day to the next. Now that you have a sense of where you've landed, the vast, rugged, and unpredictable world of the early medieval North, let's narrow our view. We're about to zoom in on one small, essential part of this universe, your daily life, your home, and the simple routines that keep you alive. But first, take a breath. Because, in this world, survival is an art, and every day is a challenge, one that might bring tears, or at least a good long sigh of relief. As your eyes flutter open, you stretch slowly, muscles protesting from yesterday's toil, your body reminding you that even in this simpler life, comfort is a fleeting luxury. Your first instinct is to find water, perhaps in a wooden basin or a clay jar, cold and uninviting as it slips beneath your fingertips. You dip your hands into the basin, feeling the rough texture of the wood, the chill of the water biting into your skin. It's not the warm, soothing rinse of a modern shower, but a splash and hope effort aimed to clear away sleep and the remnants of last night's dreams. You take a shaky breath, your nose catching the pungent aroma of wet wool and smoky firewood, and splash the water on your face, blinking away the gritty feeling of dirt and sweat. In this world, hygiene isn't about luxury or beauty routines. No fragrant soaps or scented oils, just water, sometimes cold enough to make your teeth chatter, and a scrap of coarse cloth or a rough towel to dry your face. Many believe that bathing too often invites illness, so most prefer to keep their distance from the water, relying instead on herbs and scents to purify the air. You might have a bundle of dried herbs, sage, juniper, or rosemary, burning faintly nearby, the smoke curling up and filling the room with a sharp, herbal perfume. Forget your 10-step skincare routine. Here, survival is splashing some water and hoping the smell doesn't scare the neighbors. Your home is a humble one, perhaps a small, low-ceilinged cabin with walls made of wattle and daub, darkened by age and smoke. The floor is uneven packed earth or rough-hewn planks that creak beneath your steps. A fire crackles in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the room, filling the space with a warm, smoky scent that clings to everything, your clothes, your hair, even the air itself. Wooden shelves hold simple clay pots, some filled with dried herbs, others with grains or salt. Utensils are made of rough pottery and battered metal, worn smooth from years of use. Every sound, the snap of burning wood, the drip of water, the faint squeak of mice, becomes a part of the quiet rhythm of your daily life. The smell of burnt wood mingles with the faint aroma of damp clothes hanging nearby, ready to be worn again after a quick rinse. Your clothes are rough, heavy, and designed for durability. Wool tunics that itch against your skin, thick leather shoes that pinch your feet, and a simple cloak that wraps around your shoulders. Your body responds with a series of small protests, an itch from the coarse fabric, a shiver from the cool air, a stiffness in your joints from yesterday's labor. Your idea of uncomfortable clothing might be a scratchy sweater, but here it's wool that feels like hugging a hedgehog, and you're already wishing for a moment of relief. As you sit up, your stomach reminds you that hunger is persistent, so you reach for the first meal of the day. Perhaps a piece of stale bread, dense and dry, with a slice of aged cheese that's grown sharper with time. A sip of sour, weak mead or broth that's thin and salty, enough to keep you going but hardly a gourmet experience. The flavors are simple and honest, nothing like the elaborate coffees or smoothies you're used to, just the basic sustenance that keeps your body moving. You chew slowly, tasting the dryness, feeling the texture of the bread crumble in your mouth, the saltiness of the broth lingering on your tongue. It's not the breakfast of champions, but it's enough. Survival's breakfast, wrapped in a crust of necessity. Before you step out into the world, you perform small rituals, touching a charm carved from bone or stone, whispering a prayer to the gods for protection or good weather. Sometimes a bundle of herbs is burned as an incense, filling the space with a smoky, bitter aroma that's meant to ward off sickness or evil spirit. You might even wear a simple amulet, perhaps a carved animal or symbol, believing it offers some small shield against the unseen dangers lurking outside. It's a ritualized act, a moment of quiet superstition before facing the day, knowing that despite all your preparations, luck still plays a big role in survival. Now, your body feels the weight of the day ahead, stiff from sleep, cold from the draft, and already itching beneath the layers of rough fabric. You stand, stretching once more, muscles protesting, as if reminding you of their presence. You reach for your rough-spun cloak, pull it over your shoulders, and tighten your belt. Your hands, calloused from work, grasp the simple tools or weapons you'll need for the day. You glance around your humble home, the flickering fire, the worn furniture, the scattered tools, and brace yourself for what's next. And just as you prepare to step outside, to face the world beyond your door, you pause for a moment. Because in this life, hygiene isn't a matter of vanity or comfort, but a matter of necessity, an act of resilience, a small act of defiance against the chaos of survival. Your routine may seem primitive, even strange, but it's the foundation of your day. It's the quiet, almost meditative ritual that keeps you going day after day in a world where every moment is a test of endurance and every breath a small victory. With that, you're ready to face the outside, the chores, the animals, the unpredictable weather, and to see what the day has in store. But first, take a breath. Because, in this world, every little act of hygiene, every scratchy cloth, every sip of sour broth is part of the story of survival, an ancient dance you're learning anew, one rough, honest step at a time. The ground beneath your feet is a patchwork of mud and uneven stones, slick with recent rain, or perhaps the morning's dew. Each step squelching softly, a reminder that even the earth is never still in this season. The sun has yet to fully rise, casting a muted grey over the landscape, and the silence is punctuated only by the distant calls of crows or the faint clang of a smith's hammer echoing from the village blacksmith's forge. You're already dressed for the day, perhaps a sturdy wool cloak wrapped tight around your shoulders, leather boots that have seen better days, and a satchel of herbs or tools slung over your shoulder. Maybe you carry a small mask with a beak, a relic of a time when even your face was a tool of your trade, or a pouch of dried herbs to ward off illness. The world around you begins to stir. Children run past, their laughter ringing out like bright bells, reckless and carefree, while villagers start their daily routines, men sharpening implements, women tending to livestock, elders exchanging news and gossip by the fire. The smell of damp earth mingles with the scent of baked bread from a nearby oven, and the faint aroma of burning wood drifts through the air. You notice the way people glance at you, some nod respectfully, recognizing your role in the community, while others cast wary, curious looks, part admiration, part suspicion. As you move through the streets, your presence is unmistakable, your role clear, though the specifics might be a mystery to outsiders. Your job could be to hunt, to gather, to tend the fields, or perhaps to repair tools and weapons. Every task vital in a world where survival is a constant negotiation with nature and necessity. Today you might be heading to the marketplace, weaving through stalls piled high, with dried fish, salted meats, and rough-hewn pottery. The merchants' shouts fill the air, more chaotic than a traffic jam, and with more pigs than people. The smell of roasting meat and fresh bread mingles with the sweat of traders and the faint scent of cow dung, an aroma that's become as familiar as your own reflection. You might need to barter, bargaining over a sharpened axe or a bundle of herbs, your voice rising above the din, your hands busy with the exchange. Or perhaps you're off to a communal gathering, a ritual, a training session, or a meeting of warriors preparing for patrols or raids. The sounds of the village pulse around you, a mixture of voices, metal striking metal, the soft murmur of prayers, and the occasional shouted order. You move with purpose, your senses heightened, feeling the rough texture of your gloves, hearing the scrape of your tools, smelling the faint tang of sweat and smoke. Your work today might involve more than simple chores. It's a vital part of your social fabric. Maybe you're sharpening blades, preparing traps, or repairing fences, each task a small act of defiance against the chaos that nature and neighboring tribes can bring. The raw, gritty feel of the work is almost meditative, yet there's always the underlying tension, an awareness that your efforts are both necessary and fragile. As you go about your duties, you're acutely aware of how others perceive you. The village elders might watch you with a mixture of respect and wariness, knowing your role is essential, but also recognizing how close you are to the edge, living at the mercy of the land and the elements. Children stare at you, half curious, half terrified. Your rough appearance, your tools, your presence a mystery they're still too young to understand. Soldiers pass by, their armor clanking softly, eyes sharp and alert, always ready for trouble. Women exchange quick glances and men nod in acknowledgement, their faces weathered and toughened by years of hardship. Sometimes a trader or a traveler will stop, eyeing you with a mixture of admiration and suspicion, considering whether you're friend or foe. Every interaction, every glance is a reminder that life in this world is a constant balancing act. Trust is scarce, and survival depends on a delicate web of relationships built on respect, fear, and necessity. You might find yourself recalling some odd fact of this life, like how some villagers believed that carrying a small bone or a piece of iron kept disease at bay, or how a particular chant or prayer could turn the tide of bad luck. Perhaps the blacksmith's old wife swore that smoking herbs in a certain pattern inside the village kept evil spirits away. An aromatic, smoky ritual that's as much about faith as it is about superstition. Behind every busy market stall and every wary glance, there's a deeper fear of illness, of invasion, of misfortune that shapes this entire world. To understand why people act the way they do, you must step into their beliefs, their superstitions, and their collective anxieties. But for now, you focus on your role, an integral piece of this ancient community, moving through the day with purpose, resilience, and perhaps a little humor at how different this life is from your modern routines. And as you continue your work, remember, every task, no matter how mundane or grueling, is part of a larger story, one of strength, sacrifice, and the quiet hope that tomorrow will be just a little better than today. You feel it in the way people glance nervously over their shoulders, whispering prayers under their breath as you pass by. An almost instinctive gesture, a silent plea for protection amidst the unseen threats lurking in every corner. The streets are heavy with a palpable tension. Churches are packed to the brim, their walls thick with the smell of incense and beeswax candles flickering in the dim light. The distant toll of a funeral bell resonates like a mournful heartbeat, echoing through the empty spaces of the town, reminding everyone of the fragile line between life and death. In these moments, the weight of collective dread presses down on you, as if the very stones beneath your feet carry the weight of centuries of worry. Everyday life is infused with an almost sacred sense of trepidation. Before you start your daily task, whether it's tending to the sick, gathering herbs, or repairing tools, you cross yourself, murmuring a quick prayer as if those words could somehow stave off catastrophe. Small statues of saints are everywhere, on windowsills, around the hearth, tucked into corners, each one a silent guardian against evil, each one a symbol of hope in a world that feels perpetually on the brink. You see processions winding through the streets, monks singing hymns that seem to float in the heavy air like a fragile thread of light. Candles flicker in churches filled with the scent of burning incense, a fragrant cloud that seems to purify not just the space but also the very atmosphere of fear. Today you might scroll through your mental images of modern comfort, TikTok videos, memes, or endless social feeds. Yet here, people clutch rosaries as if they were life jackets in a storm. That beaded chain isn't just a religious relic, it's a lifeline, a tangible anchor pulling them back from the abyss of unseen horrors. Superstitions are woven into daily routines like a second skin. You might see someone pinning a dried herb or a tiny charm to their cloak, believing it will ward off the miasma, the foul air thought to carry the disease. Perhaps they carry a small, twisted bone in their pocket, whispering that it keeps spirits and sickness at bay. Or maybe they believe that whacking themselves with a leather strap in the town square will earn divine mercy, an act as much about show as faith, a ritual that's the medieval version of essential oils, except with a slightly higher chance of accidental poisoning. You become acutely aware of the collective fears that shape every interaction. The threat of the plague hangs over everyone like a dark cloud, an invisible, insidious presence that could descend at any moment. The community lives in a state of constant vigilance, watching for signs of sickness in neighbors or strange behaviors in children. There are whispered rumors of witches and heretics, people accused of consorting with spirits or practicing forbidden magic, almost always a quick route to a public lynching or exile. Famine and war are equally tangible fears. A bad harvest or a raid by rival tribes could wipe out entire families overnight. You see mobs gathering around accused witches, their faces twisted with suspicion, some ready to burn a woman or man alive on the flimsiest of evidence. The community is a fragile web of trust and fear, held together by shared superstitions and a collective desire to survive. As someone like you, whether a healer, a priest, or a healer of wounds, you're caught in this web of anxiety. People look at you with a mix of hope and suspicion. Some see you as a possible savior, a conduit for divine grace, or a healer who can push back the darkness. Others eye you nervously, wondering if your knowledge of herbs and prayers could be a gift or a curse. Perhaps you're secretly working with the spirits, or maybe you're just as much a part of the danger as the disease itself. When you pass through a crowd, you notice the quick glances, the whispered prayers, and the wary silence that follows. The old man clutching his rosary tightly, the woman muttering a prayer as she offers you a bowl of broth. Each gesture is a testament to how deeply fear and faith are intertwined in this world. Among the oddest beliefs are the bizarre practices meant to ward off evil or illness. Some believed that carrying a dead toad in your pocket would keep the plague at bay, an odd charm, a small, squirming guardian of health. Others thought that whipping themselves in the streets, blood streaming down their backs, would earn divine mercy or purify their sins enough to escape disease. It's the medieval equivalent of essential oils, except with a slightly higher chance of accidental poisoning, an aromatic mix of herbs, blood, and desperation. There are those who believe that singing specific chants or wearing amulets carved with symbols can turn back the dark forces, or that placing a mirror in the doorway can deflect evil spirits. Every object, every ritual seems to carry a story, a small act of rebellion or faith that offers a sliver of hope against the overwhelming tide of dread. Fear here is like the smoke from 100 chimneys. You breathe it in whether you want to or not. It is woven into the fabric of daily life, shaping decisions, coloring interactions, and influencing every breath you take. It binds the community together, but also drives wedges of suspicion and paranoia. You sense it in the hushed conversations behind closed doors, in the frantic cross yourself before entering a house, in the anxious glances at the sky for signs of storms or divine wrath. It's a silent, ever-present companion, whispering that no one is truly safe, no matter how strong or devout. But even within this heavy atmosphere of fear, there is a strange, unbreakable resilience. People cling to their beliefs, their rituals, and each other, finding comfort in shared superstitions and collective prayers. They weave hope into their daily routines, as if the very act of faith could somehow hold back the darkness, even if just for one more day. And beyond the prayers and charms, there are bonds that keep life moving, fragile, human, and surprisingly resilient. Because in a world where the shadows threaten to swallow the light, it is these very fears that remind you of what it means to be alive, an ongoing dance between dread and hope, woven through every prayer, every ritual, and every heartbeat. You begin to see how, despite the harshness of this world, its relentless struggles, its shadows of fear, people cling to one another with a strength born from necessity and hope. You notice how they lean on each other, not just for bread or warmth, but for the kind of comfort only another heartbeat nearby can bring. It's in the way a mother gently pats her child's shoulder after a long day, or how neighbors exchange a quick, knowing glance when a cough hints at sickness. Here, companionship is a lifeline woven into every shared moment, every whispered word in the flickering firelight. Step inside a typical household and you'll see it. Families piled together in close quarters, sometimes packed so tight that forgetting Netflix family drama is easy. Here, your cousin might literally sleep on the floor 2 feet away from you every single night, sharing the same threadbare blanket, the same quiet worries. Grandparents sit by the fire telling stories that double as lessons, their voices creaking but steady, anchoring the younger generations amidst the chaos. Children run amok, their laughter ringing out like a fragile bell, yet their tiny hands clutching tightly to their parents' arms, seeking reassurance in uncertain times. The family in this world is both sanctuary and prison, a web of obligations and bonds that keep you going, even when the weight of duty feels almost too heavy to bear. And it's not just family. On the rougher streets, friendships bloom in small, unexpected acts of solidarity. You see neighbors helping each other hoist a new beam onto a hut, sharing a crust of bread in the cold, or exchanging whispered advice when sickness strikes. A quick hand squeeze, a quiet nod. These are the currency of trust in a world suspicious of outsiders. Yet, even in this fragile web, suspicion lurks like a shadow. With the threat of plague or witchcraft hanging over everyone, friendships can turn on a dime. You might find yourself on the receiving end of a wary glance or a hushed accusation about strange behavior, especially if someone's health suddenly falters. Trust here is a delicate thing, fragile as a spider's web, easily broken by a rumor or a jealous stare. And speaking of bonds, love is never far from sight, though it's often whispered rather than shouted. A young man steals a glance across a smoky tavern, his eyes darting to the girl behind the counter, a promise of a dance if the fiddler's strings don't snap first. Lovers exchange secret notes hidden in the folds of their cloaks, promising forever amidst the chaos of daily life. Promises of marriage are made with a handshake and a prayer, sometimes on the same day, sometimes after months of stolen moments and cautious hope. Romantic gestures here are simple but heartfelt, an embroidered piece of cloth, a shared sip of mead, a hurried kiss behind the barn. Humor lightens these moments. Your modern Tinder swipe seems almost silly compared to a glance across a crowded hall, where a flickering candle and a promise of dance can be everything. The social hierarchy molds these relationships too. you notice the respect or wariness people give to those of higher status. A noble's steward might be treated with deference, but also with suspicion, as if their wealth could vanish with a bad harvest or a bad choice. The clergyman, revered by some and feared by others, moves through the community like a shadow, respected for his spiritual authority but never fully trusted. The healer or the plague doctor might be seen as both a blessing and a threat, respected for their knowledge, yet sometimes regarded with suspicion, as if their touch or their prayers could just as easily summon misfortune. And then there are the larger gatherings, community events that pulse with life and meaning. You find yourself caught in the swirl of a festival, where the air is thick with the scent of roasting meat, fresh bread, and spiced ale. People wear bright, embroidered garments that glow in the flickering torchlight, cloaks and tunics that tell stories of family lineage or local legends. The sound of gaitas and drums fills the night, interwoven with laughter, singing, and the occasional argument over who should lead the next dance. At funerals, the mood shifts. Mourners gather in somber procession, their voices hushed but heavy with grief. You can feel the cold stone of the church, the flicker of candles lighting faces streaked with tears, the faint scent of herbs and burnt offerings lingering in the air. These rituals are more than tradition, they're lifelines, moments when the community's bonds are reinforced through shared sorrow or celebration. But it's not all harmony. Rivalries simmer beneath the surface, disputes over land or cattle, jealousies that turn into accusations of witchcraft, petty disputes that escalate into accusations of curses or sabotage. You see a neighbor whispering furiously in the marketplace, pointing fingers at someone rumored to have cast a spell, the tension thick enough to cut with a blade. In these moments, the lives of your neighbors aren't just intertwined, they're tangled in a web of suspicion and intrigue where a single word or glance can ignite a fire that burns for days. And yet amid all this, you can't help but smile at the humor woven into this tapestry of life. Your modern office party? Try a medieval wedding feast where half the guests are drunk by noon and the other half are arguing over goats. Your friendly neighborhood Wi-Fi? Here. It's a rumor passed by word of mouth, sometimes true, sometimes wildly exaggerated, always delivered with a wink or a scowl. And at least your neighbors don't accuse you of witchcraft whenever your firewood runs out or your cows give odd milk. A few strange facts might make you smile, like how some villages believed sneezing during a wedding was a sign of good luck, unless it wasn't, depending on which grandmother you asked. Or how public punishments, public humiliations, beatings, or even exile were community events, often as much about entertainment as justice, like the medieval version of reality TV. These relationships, these rituals, these conflicts, they all remind you that in this brutal world, human connection is what keeps the flame flickering. Because even here, in a place where danger lurks behind every shadow, people find ways to reach out through shared meals, stories, or just a simple touch on the arm. They lean on each other, not just for survival, but to hold on to something precious amid the chaos, something that makes life worth living, even when the world feels like it's teetering on the edge of chaos. And as you observe and participate in this complex web of bonds, you realize that in the end, it's these ties, fragile yet fierce, that give this brutal existence its deepest meaning. You wake up to the faint, inviting aroma of bread baking in the communal oven, a warm, yeasty scent that seems to seep through the thin walls of your humble dwelling. As you stretch, you notice the soft glow of daylight filtering through a small, rough-hewn window, casting shifting patterns over the wooden table that serves as your morning altar. Today's light dances across a simple spread laid out before you, worn wooden trenchers holding crusty loaves of dark rye or barley bread, their surfaces cracked and golden, ready to be torn apart. Nearby, a bowl of porridge, thick and steaming, beckons with its earthy aroma, the faint scent of boiled grains, mingling with hints of herbs and a splash of mead or weak ale. The air is filled with a gentle hum of activity from the village, the distant clatter of hooves, the muffled voices of traders, the crackle of a small fire in the hearth. You sit, your fingers brushing over the textured surface of a rough clay cup filled with water from the well. Water that tastes of earth and stone, a little muddy, but refreshing enough to awaken your senses. The simple utensils, thin wooden spoons, a carved knife, are familiar companions, worn smooth from use. Today, your humble menu is the daily bread of the common folk, a hearty pottage made from lentils, beans, or root vegetables flavored with wild herbs gathered from nearby fields. Perhaps a piece of salted fish or a few boiled eggs sit beside it, their flavors straightforward but satisfying. The bread, dense and chewy, is the true centerpiece, its crust crackling softly as you break it open, revealing a dark, moist interior. You might nibble on a small piece of aged cheese, its sharp tang a reminder of how even the simplest foods can carry a story of season and craft. The drink, most likely weak ale or a diluted mead, has a faint bitterness, a reminder that in this world even refreshment comes with restraint. If you belong to the more privileged circle, your table might feature a roasted chicken or a handful of dried fruits, sweet, chewy, and preserved from better days. But for most, life is a steady rhythm of modest meals, nourishing yet humble, feeding both body and resilience. Before you eat, a quick prayer or a silent blessing is offered, an acknowledgement that the day's sustenance is a gift, a fragile blessing in a world where famine and scarcity often threaten. Hands are washed in cold water, sometimes with a splash of vinegar, a tradition that helps ward off illness and shows respect for the meal. The order at the table mirrors social hierarchy. Elders receive their portions first, a sign of respect, while children and the youngest wait patiently, their eyes bright with anticipation. You might notice the occasional exchange, a piece of bread, a sip of ale, shared across the space like an act of silent trust. As your hands move to the food, you feel the rough texture of the bread, the coolness of the clay bowl, and the slight dampness of the cloth napkin, improvised but effective, much like everything else in this world. The menu is simple, but the rituals are not. On certain days, like during Lent or other religious observances, meat is replaced by fish, and hearty feasts give way to fasting with a quiet dignity. The community observes these customs with a reverence that feels almost sacred, a shared understanding that discipline sustains them through lean times. And yet, even amid austerity, the act of eating is a celebration, an act that reconnects everyone at the table, reinforcing bonds that go beyond mere sustenance. The clink of a wooden spoon against a trough, the rustle of rough cloth, the faint crackle of a fire, these sounds create a gentle symphony of daily life. The flavors, sour from the fermented vegetables, salty from preserved fish, bitter from the herbs, are like a mosaic of survival, each bite a small victory over the hardships outside the door. Sometimes a stray fragment of dried apple or a few candied nuts are tucked into a pocket, remnants of a feast that sparks a fleeting smile or a nostalgic sigh. After the meal, the table empties, but the day's promise lingers. The last sip of ale, the final crumb of bread, leaves a quiet fullness, not just in the belly, but in the soul. As the village begins to stir again, you sense that the meal is more than nourishment. It's a ritual of resilience, a moment when life's simplicity becomes a quiet act of rebellion against the chaos beyond the door. And as the evening approaches, the scent of roasted meats and spiced wine will drift from the tavern, inviting everyone to gather once more. Because in this world of scarcity and steadfastness, it's in the sharing of food that the true strength of community is forged. And after the last bite, after the last sip, the night calls with promises of music, laughter, and small acts of courage, reminding you that even in hardship, life continues to weave its stories around the table. As you step out from the warmth of the communal table, the evening air greets you with a gentle chill, carrying whispers of laughter and the faint aroma of warm beer lingering in the tavern's shadowed corners. Lanterns sway softly, casting elongated shadows that stretch across uneven cobblestones, where the faint shuffle of footsteps and muffled voices create a tapestry of quiet human rhythm. Somewhere nearby, the scent of damp wood and slightly sour ale mingles with the sweet undertone of melted wax from candles flickering in their holders, their glow dancing over faces illuminated with the warmth of shared stories. You walk through this tapestry of life, your eyes adjusting to the dimming light, catching glimpses of figures huddled around rough wooden tables, their faces animated as dice clatter, promising fleeting luck that often falls as flat as a bill unpaid, dice rolling like promises that dissolve in the end, just another boleto no one can pay. The bustling tavern hums with life, the scrape of boots on wooden floors, the scrape of a chair pulled out, the scratch of a quill on parchment, and a chorus of voices rising and falling in a language of camaraderie and age-old jokes. You notice a game of 9 men's Morris spread out on a battered table, pieces moving with a slow, deliberate patience that contrasts with the quick, accidental slips of the dice. Laughter bubbles up, some high and carefree, others tinged with irony, like the way a drunk's voice cracks when he attempts a song, a tune that's out of tune but warm, like a blanket you're reluctant to remove. A Kaneka clinks against a mug, a sign of someone's hand steadying after a long day, the sound echoing like a heartbeat in the dark. Music begins to weave its way through the smoky haze, a simple melody played on a lyre or rebecca, its strings trembling under the fingers of someone who remembers the tune from long ago. A lone flute joins in, its breathy sound rising and falling like a tide, inviting others into a circle. You find yourself caught in a dance, feet shuffling in unison, a circle forming around the fire, the steps so basic they could be learned in a moment, yet they carry the weight of tradition. Sweat beads on brows, and the smell of warm wool and leather mingles with the earthy scent of spilled ale. The fire's crackle provides a steady heartbeat, a steady reminder that life persists amid the shadows. You move, you sway, your boots marking the rhythm, an echo of generations who have danced this same dance under the same stars. On the makeshift stage at the side, a simple tableau unfolds, a moral story, perhaps about saints and sinners, played out in rough costumes stitched from scraps of fabric and painted with hurried strokes. The villagers watch, some with reverence, others with a mischievous glint in their eyes. The actors' voices rise and fall, acting out a miracle or a moral lesson, their exaggerated gestures a reminder of a time when stories served to teach and to entertain in equal measure. Between acts, the crowd shifts toward the procession, flickering candles in hand, their flames flickering like tiny stars caught in human palms. The smell of beeswax and herbs fills the air, a scent that comforts and sanctifies. Children chase each other, their laughter ringing out, while elders whisper prayers under their breath, their faces reflecting both devotion and the weight of memories. But the night is not without its darker corners. You notice the flagellants, men and women in rough robes, their faces streaked with dirt, their movements rhythmic and relentless, chanting and whipping themselves, a spectacle that commands both fear and curiosity. Some onlookers watch in silence, others murmur superstitions, their words like a prayer or a warning, as if the very act of dancing or silence might carve a fate into the night. You catch a glimpse of a small crowd gathered around an execution or an act of discipline, a reminder that even in the joy, the shadow of mortality lurks, silent and unyielding, like the weight of a heavy cloak draped over the shoulders of this community. And through it all, your role as a healer, if you are that figure, casts a quiet shadow of respect. Eyes occasionally seek you out, seeking reassurance or a quick word, an advice whispered under the breath, a finger lightly touching the edge of a lantern to ward off ill omens. You respond with a gentle nod, touching the rough stone of the wall or the eaves of a nearby house, as if to brush away a bad dream. The community's joy and trepidation mingle like the flavors in a bitter brew, sometimes sweet, sometimes sharp, but always part of the same recipe of life. In this moment, laughter and shadows dance side by side. The dance challenges the darkness, a defiant act that says life persists despite the fragile veneer of safety. Yet the distant toll of the church bell reminds you of the delicate balance of life and death woven tightly together, inseparable as the threads of a tapestry. The night stretches on, a slow, living story where every song, every laugh, every prayer is a thread in the fabric of their existence. And as the last notes fade into the quiet night, the bell responds, a gentle, solemn reminder that all things, no matter how lively or bright, will eventually come to an end. Between one song and another, the village softly whispers, "Everything begins and everything ends here," in this shared breath of human hope and inevitable farewell. And with that thought, you know that the true cycle is never broken. It simply turns, like the seasons, like the tide, like the silent, steady heartbeat of life itself, rising and falling, dancing in the shadows, all under the watchful gaze of the stars. The midwife's gentle whisper, a prayer murmured softly, echoed in your mind, an invocation for protection, for health, for a future unburdened by the shadow of mortality that lurks so close in these times. The first cry, a tiny bell ringing through the quiet chamber, marks the beginning of a journey that will be filled with promises made in hurried whispers, with hopes wrapped in simple cloth, and with the unspoken understanding that life, so precious, is also fleeting. As the days turn into years, you witness the sacred act of union, hands joined in the cold dawn, a small blessing bestowed at the door of the church, where community gathers as witnesses to vows made with bread and salt, symbols of sustenance and preservation. The bride's and groom's fingers entwined, their futures sealed with a simple ring or a ribbon, while music, brief and sweet, weaves through the air. Smiles and blessings, shared amidst the hum of voices, echo the quiet acknowledgement that life's greatest gift is connection, an unbreakable thread spun from generations. And then comes the work, the passing of skills from grandparent to grandchild, hands guiding tools, shaping objects that carry stories of toil and care. A worn bench, scarred and smooth from countless sitters, bears the marks of years, each scratch a whisper of advice, each dent a memory. The elders' words, sometimes a blessing, sometimes a warning, linger like the scent of herbs drying in the sun. An inheritance not just of objects, but of wisdom, patience, and resilience. You can almost feel the weight of those years in the rough grain of the wood, in the sturdy handle of a knife, or the well-worn edge of a sickle, passed from hand to hand, life to life. Then comes the inevitable shadow: illness, fatigue, the slow decline that no craft can halt. You see the sickbed, a simple pallet with rough blankets, the faint scent of herbs and sweat lingering in the air. Murmured prayers, a quick anointing, the soft touch of a hand. These are the last acts of care, hurried and quiet, not always complete, but full of dignity. When pestilence arrives, there is no time for proper rites, only the swift gathering, the hurried shovels, the dark earth, and the faint, distant toll of the church bell, calling the community to remember those who have passed. Their names, spoken softly at the table, linger like a prayer, a reminder that every life is a thread in the fabric of the village, fragile but woven with purpose. And so, in the silence that follows, the bells toll slowly, deep and grave, marking the final chapter. In times of crisis, the community gathers quietly, sometimes in shared graves, sometimes by the edge of a simple pit, where the earth is cold and unyielding. Yet even amid these somber moments, hope persists. The memory of those gone remains alive in stories told around the hearth, in the names whispered at the table, in the silent prayers of remembrance. The icons, stained glass windows, faded frescoes depicting the dance macabre, skulls painted with humility, remind you that life is fleeting, that birth and death are inseparable, like the breath and the heartbeat. In this quiet reflection, you see that every day is a gift, an act repeated countless times in the simple rituals of daily life. Every loaf of bread broken, every cup of bitter herbal tea sipped, every smile shared in the midst of hardship, these are the small miracles that sustain you. The candle's flame flickers softly, casting a gentle glow that slowly diminishes, like the fleeting nature of existence itself. Yet the warmth remains, lingering in the heart's quiet sanctuary. As you close your eyes and breathe in the familiar scent of earth and wax, you feel the steady rhythm of life, its beginnings, its promises, its inevitable farewells. The night quietly settles in, a gentle curtain falling over the day's story. The stars outside continue their silent vigil, indifferent yet comforting, reminding you that in the grand cycle of birth and death, there is both beauty and peace. Now, rest. The candle's glow diminishes, but the warmth remains. Close your eyes. The world continues in its quiet, unending dance, each life a fleeting spark, each goodbye a whisper carried by the wind. And in that gentle acknowledgement, you find your own peace.